So I've already mentioned that there are other ways to get coordination, right, besides willingness to pay. In effect, I have students in my class, they have to pay in air. Now, I don't receive the air, right, or they're giving up air. So we can ration. But let's talk about money versus cost. So which costs more? Now, this is aside from an online class or an on-site class, which costs more? Well, we'll come back to that. There's a distinction we need to draw between expense and cost. Which is more expensive, an online class or an on-site class? And I think the answer is an online class because you have like a $25 technology fee, something like that. If any of you have taken on-site classes, what's the difference in cost? And you say nothing. Well, what's the difference in expense? Nothing. But what's the difference in cost? What's the difference in cost between an 8 a.m. class and an 11 o'clock class, or 11:40, whatever the class schedule is? But an 8 a.m. versus an 11 o'clock class. Which is more expensive? They're the same thing. Which is costlier? Well, for most of us, an 8 a.m. class is going to be costlier than an 11 a.m. class. Because we have to get up earlier, we have to give up more sleep, right? So my point here is that what we're going to be talking about this term, what individuals choose according to is not their expected marginal expense. They choose according to their expected marginal cost. We aren't just talking about money here. We're talking about, right, willingness to pay here. Really, we're talking about willingness to pay or sacrifice. So that's one way we can ration things. So economics is not the study of money. There's a fair bit of money involved. We don't want to think just in terms of money, however. We want to understand that what we care about with cost is the sacrifice, the value that we give up. Now, we'll talk more about this. But what we definitely do care about is rationing mechanisms, figuring out who gets what. And willingness to pay is one way to do that. Or, right, we could actually make that explicit and charge a price. This is the way we ration most things that we see. We ration based on willingness to pay as exhibited in price. Now, the world, we have a scarce amount of stuff in the world. There's a finite amount of resources, finite number of resources, finite quantity of goods and opportunities. So we have to figure out who gets them. Now, if we think about maximizing social coordination, we would want to, in order to maximize social coordination, we would want the people who value those things the most to get them. That's a side note. So we're going to have to talk about, right? So there's ups and there's pluses and minuses to different rationing mechanisms. Some of them are more effective at getting those resources into the hands of the people who value them the most. Some of them are less so. How else could we ration? Well, we could ration based on first come, first served, right? We could, right, who shows up first? Now that again is sort of a way, right, is willingness to pay again. So maybe I'll distinguish. The difference, of course, is that in this situation, first come, first served, nobody receives the value that the people give up. What else could we do? Well, we could do a lottery, right? We could do it randomly. We could ration based on need. We could ration based on strength. In other words, whoever's the strongest gets the stuff. Why? Because if we don't give it to them, they're going to punch us anyways. And so this here, both, right? We typically frown upon rationing based on strength. Right? This is part of this is that it could be painful. There's also justice concerns, right? So that's a problem with rationing based on strength. There's also no guarantee that the person who values something the most is going to be the strongest. So this isn't, we do this sometimes, but I think probably a good thing to largely ignore this. Don't ration based on strength. How about issues with rationing based on price? Well, one of the issues is that there's oftentimes a divergence between, or not oftentimes, but sometimes a divergence between willingness to pay and ability to pay. And so you might have people who really value something who don't have the money in hand, right? That's in at least part of the argument behind student loans, is that young folks value this university education that will make them so much more productive in their lives, but they don't have the scratch, they don't have the cash on hand, and if they had to pay for it themselves out of their pocket, it would take them longer to get through, etc. Again, as I've talked about, I'm not too convinced that that the money is the major thing that you're giving up by going to college, but right, so that's an issue with rationing based on price. As I mentioned already, first come, first served is immensely wasteful. So if we rationed university seats, right, admission to university, based on first come, first serve, it'd be really wasteful. People would line up a long time in advance. They'd wait in lines. And you could think about if we did the same thing with the, PlayStation 5 is coming out. Not sure when, but not immediately. But if we rationed, it's going to be only a certain number of PlayStation 5s that come to Billings, and if we rationed those things based on first come, first serve, some people would end up spending a long time camping out in front of Walmart, right? So that, and nobody gets the value of their time. At least when we ration based on price, the person, the recipient of the price, is capturing most of the cost. Random ignores need, right? Put in quotes, need. Because what do we actually need? Nothing. Because substitutes exist for everything. So need is really not a cogent word for us to be using. We'll return to this when we get to elasticity, how we can actually talk about need in a meaningful way. But for us, at this point, need, what do you need? Nothing. There's nothing that you need when you realize that when we live on the margin. But, right, here we could say desire, right? Who values it the most? If we just hand things out randomly, there's a pretty good chance they're going to end up in the hands of somebody who doesn't value them as highly. And maybe we should just ration based on need. That sounds attractive. And I think it is. The issue, of course, is answering the how do you know that question. How do we know who needs something the most? Now, we do ration a lot of things based on need, but in our private lives, hopefully, right? In our friend groups, in our families, in our romantic relationships, hopefully we ration based on need. I would be very sad if you told me that your mother gave out hugs to the person, to the kid in the family who paid the most for them. That would be a very sad world. How do we answer the how do you know the question in our intimate relationships, in our friend groups, in our families? Well, we have a lot of time and place specific information about people. We have repeated interactions. Generally speaking, we've known these people for a long time. We get a sense of what they like and what they value and what they quote unquote need. Now, there are problems with all of these, including price. The issue, of course, is that we're just looking at one side. We're just deciding who gets what. This is just for existing things. Turns out that this one up here not only lets people express their preferences, because first come, first serve does that as well. These others don't really, right? The other issue here, if we rationed PlayStation 5s based on need, part of it would be, how do I even know how much I need it compared to somebody else? But then we have the issue of maybe I would have an incentive to lie and say, oh, I really like PlayStation, when in fact, I'm somewhat ambivalent. So These problems are there for all of these, but there's a bigger problem that we need to solve. Remember that information and incentive structure to provide things? These are just problems with allocating existing resources, the stuff that we currently have. There's another question: what would cause us to have more stuff to ration? What would cause us to communicate information that people value these items and an incentive for people to rearrange their lives in a manner that will get them to us? So that's the bigger problem. What will cause more stuff to be available to ration? And it turns out of all of these, the only one that provides an incentive and information, first come, first served, again, will provide retailers with information that people value this stuff, but it won't provide them with an incentive to provide it. And it turns out that this, out of all of these, and all of the ones I can think about, is pretty much the only one that provides, does have a downside, right? There might be this distinction between ability to pay and willingness to pay, but price is the only one that will cause more stuff to be available to ration by rewarding suppliers and sending them a bunch of important information. By the way, we're going to talk a lot about prices this term, not because we like money, but because we value social coordination. So there's a limited amount of stuff in the world. That's just reality. And some things have a high value to some people and a low value to others. And we would like to get the people who value the stuff a lot to have it, and we would like to get the people who value it not very much to go and find a substitute, right? So, how can we get people with a low value to find substitutes? Well, we could have moral exhortation. We could say, please cut back. Think about other people. For those of you who don't really value the PlayStation, leave it on the shelves. Go play a board game or read a book, right? We do that at times. Moral exhortation. We could do a lot of different things, but it turns out one that really works pretty easily is change the price. Change the price. So we think about this. We don't care about money as economists, but we care about social coordination. And so we're typically going to focus on rationing based on price because it facilitates the system of social coordination. Now, this is weird for a lot of people. If you think about this, thinking about this can be very strange, but when was the last time you went into a shop and saw something that was really, you said, that's crazy, or you saw something on a news brief, right? What was your reaction when you saw that? You said, that's ridiculous. How dare these people charge this stuff? And then did you buy it? No, you walked away. Now, when I see this, prices, I say, that are really high, I say, ooh, guess what? This is great. I'm glad that the price is so high because it's clearly giving me the information I need to coordinate and cooperate with all the other people out there who really value this. I'm getting the information and I'm being provided with the incentives to act on the information to leave this stuff on the shelves, right? When I was living in Iraq teaching university, I got my own apartment after the first year. Then I moved out of university housing, and I needed to get the apartment furnished because they come really, when you say unfurnished apartment, it is unfurnished. There's no appliances, there's no blinds on the window. So I went to get blinds, and I said, I'm going to get some wooden blinds. That'll be a good idea. And I went down to the shop and gave them the measurements, and they thought for a while. They said, well, we'll give you some tea here. You can sit and drink tea, which is actually about a quarter sugar, and we'll go do some calculations. And so they went and did the calculations, and they came back and they said, okay, wood blinds for your apartment are going to be $2,500. That's a lot. That's way more than I thought. Now, part of me, there was an instinct to say, wait, what's wrong with you? How dare you charge this? But I had already done some homework and asked people, and they said that this shop would give me a fair rate, and they knew, as many things work in Iraq, in many parts of the world. I had connections with people in politics and people in business, and so they had made a call saying, treat this guy well. And so I didn't think they were gouging me. I didn't think they were making it up. But I still almost said, well, but then I said, wait, you know what? That sounds like a lot of money. Now, I think I like wood blinds a lot, but what other options are there? Is there anything else? They said, oh, we could do cloth. I said, oh, okay, how much would that be? So, oh, let's go do some calculations. And so I drank some more tea while they did calculations, and they came back and they said, oh, I think it was around $500 for cloth blinds. In that instant, I discovered how much, well, I gained a lot of information. I discovered that I like wood blinds more than cloth blinds, but I do not like wood blinds $2,000 more than cloth blinds. I'm still not sure how much more. Maybe $50, maybe $80, maybe even $100. I don't know. But I was provided with information and an incentive to act on that information, both about my own preferences, but then also about what should happen with things in the world. I was given a bunch of information that the resources, the labor and the raw materials and all the other stuff that goes into producing wood blinds, that somebody else valued those resources a lot more than I did. And that I should leave them alone. I should go, turns out for me, cloth blinds were a pretty close substitute. So this is true all over the world, that's one of the roles that prices serve. And so actually, when I see a really high price for something, I don't get upset. I don't get outraged. I actually go, that's great. I'm getting information that I should go find something else. I should go use a different service or product.